say from the attorney's office when the planes fly into the World Trade Center. And within that 2 months, everything changed. The AFL-CIO was not in a big rush to start talking about ports shutting down, right? Because everybody was terrified of the whole thing. And so they, oh, do you think we could quiet down on this whole thing about shutting down ports? We might sound un-American, right? The whole bargaining power started to shift about whether these guys could negotiate a settlement or not. But I think they held up, and they didn't really let the other side know that they were willing to back down for the sake of, you know, the fear of terrorism or whatever. And they were able to finally take it where it needed to go. But that was definitely a concern.
Yeah, and the government began to infiltrate our local, my local, right after I got elected in '97. And the reason we know that is because we hired a couple of ex-agents to do a sweep of my office, because my attorney had given me some information confidentially and told me just to keep this under your belt until you hear back from me. And a couple of days passed, and he called me and he said, I told you to keep this information secret. I said, I did. He said, well, it showed up someplace else. And I said, well, it didn't come from me. Not unless you was talking in your sleep or something, but it didn't come from me. And so what he did, he said, well, have you ever considered getting your office flipped? And I said, no. He said, but if you know those people who can do that kind of stuff, let's engage them. And we met at his office one night, and we planned how we would do it at night when everyone else had left and so forth. And when we had all the plans in place, he said, before you leave, let me ask you a question. How long has it been since you left the force? He said, about a year and a half. He says, when you were active, were you ever instructed, anyone you know had ever had any kind of orders to maybe look at Local 1422? And he said, yes. And you mind telling us when? And he was smiling. He looked over at me and said, yes, in 1997, after Mr. Riley was elected. And he said, we were successful in setting up some informants. We set up 3 informants in the house, and by the time I left, 1 had retired, but 2 is still operating. I don't know if they're operating today, but I assume that they are. And so, you know, we know we're constant. And even that night that we were planning our strategy, that first we were not going to go down there at a certain time, everything was being radioed down to the line where the police were. So, you know, they're there. You got to always assume that they're in the house.